The storm 310 miles south-southeast of New York City, winds around 85 miles per hour, moving north-northwest at 20. That will put it south of Long Island tonight around 8 o'clock.
The storm came in Monday night overnight, and I remember the water rising midday, high tide midday, and said, boy, we're going to be in trouble. I was doing an interview with Channel 2 News down by Hurricane Wings on Montauk Highway, and Jennifer McLogan, who's a longtime reporter, and she said, Rich, there's something really strange. It's giving me an eerie feeling, and I felt that eerie feeling also from what was being reported as to where the storm was coming. And then I remember, the next thing I remember, fast forward to about 3 o'clock in the morning, standing at American Venice on Montauk Highway in Copiague, Lindenhurst area, and there was just this calm after the storm had kind of departed. Just a literal calm. We were standing there with the Copiague fire chiefs, and we just looked at each other like, what are we going to wake up to? Because it was pitch black. Lights out all over, and we said, what are we going to see tomorrow morning when the sun comes up? And I said, guys, I'm just going to run home, take a shower, and get ready, because I don't think this is going to be good. And another quick story, so Jimmy Gallagher is the Lindenhurst fire chief. He's about 6'5". At the time, Lindenhurst fire chief at the time, and he's still an active member of the department. But Jimmy, we met him at South 6th Street in Lindenhurst, myself and Tommy Brennan, who was the mayor of Lindenhurst at the time, and Kevin McCaffrey, who's now presiding officer, county legislator, but he was the deputy mayor. And the three of us were standing there, and Jimmy's about 6'5", 6'6", and he is literally ordering all of his guys out because the water had risen so quick. They were down fighting a couple of house fires, and literally the water just started rising, and he was pulling all of his men and women out. And he had fear on his face. So when you're looking up at a tall guy who's fire chief in his uniform, like, how do we not feel good? And how bad is this that Jimmy Gallagher has got fear on his face? The most capable, the most sturdy guy. And then Jerry Gigante, who's now our current public safety commissioner. He was at the time the inspector of the 1st precinct, so he was in charge, and he came over and he literally verbally smacked me and Tommy Brennan across the face because he said, guys, snap out of it. We've got work to do. Get payloaders, get this, get that. He started doing like the orchestra leader. And Tommy Brennan and I looked and we just said, okay, whatever we need to, and we just started putting the assets together to go down, and we knew that it was not just where we were at South 6th Street in Lindenhurst, but we were getting reports from Amityville Village. Ralph Scordino, who was the mayor at the time, he's since passed, but Ralph was calling me from Babylon Village. They had a number of homes that went on fire. The Anchorage Marina went on fire, which is deep into Lindenhurst, right on the water. And so the fire department couldn't get down there, and they had to wait till the water receded. And so, of course, the next day, when we woke up kind of after maybe about an hour of sleep, not even, and then going down to South Lindenhurst and Copiague and Babylon Village and just seeing the massive destruction. You know, when you see it on TV and they say, oh, a hurricane happened here in Florida, or even more recently what we've been seeing from Hurricane Ian and Fiona in Puerto Rico and Florida, the pictures don't do it justice for you to have to be right there when you look at it and seeing giant boats that have been lifted and carried blocks away from where they were, houses that were there that you knew were there that are no longer there, just the foundation, and people walking around as if they were in a daze. It took me probably about a week to come out of the daze that storm had knocked into me as a resident, longtime resident, knowing the area very well, but more importantly as a public official, because in my mind I was saying, what are we going to do now? And that was really literally what woke me up and said, I have to serve the residents who've elected me with my team here at Town Hall, and had to get back up and running as quickly as possible to get them the help that they needed. But we spent that whole, probably from Thursday before to leading up into the storm, pounding away at people, telling them that they needed to leave, because all the reports were saying that this, we didn't know the devastation, but we knew that this was going to be something serious, a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And we kept pounding away and telling people, you've got to leave, you got to prepare, shut the gas off, do all these types of things. We were putting out alerts on our emergency alert system. The Suffolk police were doing the same thing, Amityville police. And then, of course, people didn't leave, so some left the home the way that was, which is what triggered a lot of the fires because of the water coming up and just old wiring, things like that. So to see the fires from afar, and then Jimmy Gallagher saying, no, I can't have the men and women in there, and pulling them out, like, okay, are these fires going to continue to one house after another? And it did happen in a couple of neighborhoods, although I could say the damage was very limited in terms of fire damage after that, but the water just did the destruction. I mean, we lost probably over 100 homes, literally lost them. And then there were probably about, I would say, 6,000 to 8,000 homes that either received full damage down to just some water intrusion. So you were talking about a number of families that didn't have a place to live. The volunteers were awesome. Our volunteers, and look, they've had training like this. They've been prepared for things like this. But of course, they're neighbors, so they're watching and some of them lost their homes that lived in those areas. So you had them, and they had to deal with that psyche. So what was great was Governor Cuomo, who was governor at the time, sent down the National Guard, the State National Guard, and the 106th Airborne, which is out of West Hampton, Gabreski Airport, was sent in. And so when we saw those uniformed people coming in a couple of days later, and they were mobilized at Wellwood Avenue and Montauk Highway, that kind of became the center. We set up a First Precinct, set up a command center there. The National Guard had a center there, and so that was able to bring everything. Because if you looked at Suffolk County, really, we were the hardest hit in Suffolk County. Obviously, Nassau County had their experiences as well. Islip had some damage, and obviously Fire Island and on the shoreline, and then Brookhaven and Mastic Shirley area. But we had the most extensive of the damage in Suffolk County in terms of the water impact. And so Wellwood and Montauk became kind of the center, main street of town, and that's where everybody was filing in and out of. But to see those uniformed people, it kind of gave you like, okay, we're not alone. We're not going to have to do this all on our own. And when those assets started coming in, both people and equipment, because a lot of people were concerned about looting that was going on, if you can believe it, that there are crazy people out there who want to take advantage of somebody else's sorrow. And there were people coming in boats into different canal areas. So having the National Guard out there with the uniforms, with the trucks, and putting on a show and a presence there, we were able to commandeer a lot of looters who were trying to come in and loot the homes that were damaged because they didn't have any security or they were wide open. So our town workforce was mostly assigned to the areas north of Montauk Highway because we had so many trees down that we had to get those taken care of in order to get electric back up and running. So the goal was to try and pick off large chunks of the town to get them back up and running, because then we were going to rely on them to help us with south of Montauk. So we had ENCON, which is our residential garbage collection district. Patty DiMatteo and her staff were out there helping us clean up and get all of the debris off the streets so that people could start to see some normalcy. I went to visit New Orleans 6 months after Hurricane Katrina. I went down there and we did some volunteer work to help the residents down there back in, I think it was 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit. And the thing I noticed the most when we were down there is that the debris was not removed from the street. So we were in the lower 9th Ward, and there were residents coming up to us, and I could see just the exhaustion on their faces. And the one thing I always kind of filed in my mind was that not only is it physical, whatever, if you were hurt during this storm or you got sick during the storm, but it's also mental. And so I thought our responsibility was to try and get things looking back to normal as quickly as possible. So everyone has put their belongings out at the street, right? Everything is waterlogged. It's going to start causing mold. And so I said, we've got to get all of this stuff out of here as quickly as possible so that people cannot be coming home every day and seeing their life out at the curb. And so Patty, Encon, Winters Brothers, which is our commercial carter, and our town staff went to work. We created a spot at Tanner Park to be able to move everything to. So I said, just get it from in front of the houses as quickly as possible, and we'll then set up a transfer station, and then we can process it on our own time. So we did that and created one at Tanner Park, and it really helped. People were, when I was going down there and visiting different neighborhoods throughout, you could see that people were happy to see that off of there. And that was something that always stuck with me when I went down for Katrina, because the New Orleans residents that I met and talked to, they just said, oh, we're waiting for the city to come. Like they were just like exhausted from looking at their stuff out at the curb. And that was 6 months in we were down there. So I always filed that in the back of my mind as a public official, that would be something we would respond to. And I think we responded well. We coordinated with the three villages. Lindenhurst, we were working very closely with them, Babylon and Amityville. And so we were able to kind of all pull together in order to get that, to address the mental part of the whole storm. Yeah, so, I mean, look, we had, I guess, sort of an invisible Sandy in COVID. So we had another kind of natural phenomenon disaster that we had to do, and that was kind of very different response from Sandy. But what we've done from Sandy is we've learned a lot from the residents who live down there, the public safety people that we've worked with, both on the fire rescue side as well as the police side. We've been very active with New York State in coming up with resiliency projects to make things better, more hardened, that they could withstand the storm. We've assisted residents down there who wanted to raise their homes to make them more not accessible to storm damage. We've done environmental projects throughout the town that have helped reduce the amount of nitrogen in the bay so that the bay and the shoreline would be able to restore on its own and act as more of a hardened area. We've done all the generators, all those types of things that we would be prepared for the next round. And we've also run through a couple of what they call tabletop exercises where all the staff says, okay, we've got another Sandy, and we've kind of tested our responses. Because look, that night I was sitting in the Olympic Diner in Deer Park at 6 o'clock, and the diner literally started shaking when the storm blew in. And the guys in Central called and said, you got to come back here because the phones are exploding and things. And again, driving from Deer Park back to Lindenhurst, I'm saying, what are we going to be looking at? And then from there, knowing that was the extent of that damage, that literally lasted for years. Okay, at the time when FEMA came in the first week, I said, this is going to be a 5 to 7 year recovery. And to this day, I mean, we've still got a couple of stragglers who we're working with, that just couldn't get it together. But we literally worked and held hands with individuals and families throughout in order to get them through the GOSER process, which was the grant program for people who had destruction, food banks that had to be set up, medical assistance that had to be provided, all those things. So we really created like a whole operation that we've taken and kind of codified, but now have been fine-tuning it so that we would be ready for the next storm. 10 years after that fateful night back in October of 2012, I can't say enough thank yous to the volunteer fire and rescue personnel in the town of Babylon and the surrounding areas that came in and assisted us in those immediate days after. Our Suffolk Police Department, our Amityville Police Department, and all of the volunteers that cropped up and set up organizations that literally save lives, like Camp Bulldog, which was a mainstay down at Shore Road Park, Adopt a House, which worked to help gut houses and get people back to where they needed to be. Friends Helping Friends out of Babylon Village, all of these organizations that were just average Babylonians saying that they had to do something and couldn't sit by and let their fellow neighbors suffer. We would not have been able to do what we did. Long Island Cares, United Way, Island Harvest, all came through with what we needed during our time of need. And that's why now, 10 years later, we've been paying it forward, making our ARPA money available to these organizations, that federal money that came in for COVID, because we know we're all one family here in the town of Babylon, and we know that it's important to say thank you and important to make sure that you're available to help when someone else is in need, because you may be that person in need at some time.